Every time. There we go. Okay, while it's loading up here. Hello, everyone. Wow, happy Thursday. I have a very special guest here. Welcome back. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching from, anywhere in the world. My name is Jake Sussman. For those of you who don't know, I'm a dyslexia, ADHD influencer, entrepreneur. And since quarantine started, I have been interviewing many people, from parents to industry leaders to doctors to business leaders, and also people like you. And you know, the cool thing is that we all have at least one thing in common. It's that we all struggled some way, shape, and form in school with how we learn. Now, today, I have a very special guest. His name is Tomer. And Tomer and I, we've gone back, how long have we known each other, Tomer? What do you think? Probably 5 or 6 years or so. And Tomer is an ex-IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, Special Forces Commando and entrepreneur. And he is a remarkable human being. Tomer has ADHD. And with ADHD, comes a lot of challenges. But what's cool about Tomer's story is that ADHD actually helped him not only save thousands of lives, but helped him become an elite soldier in one of the most sought after units in the world. So Tomer, welcome.
Well, thanks, Jake. First of all, it's really a pleasure to be here and to be following up on this issue that is so important. You know, I really admire the attention that you guys are giving it, and I thought, just by listening to your posts, I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity for me to reflect on my own journey with struggling in that sense in school, and having those attention issues that were very much overlooked by the system, and you know, really created a lot of frustration that mirrored itself later in life, burst out into a form of a superpower, and something that was very much tested,
Right.
both in very intense military training, but also in the battlefield. And that's something that I want to share with those who have that tremendous energy.
Now, Tomer, as you can see, I'm wearing my superhero, my Superman shirt. And I think superheroes and superpowers are going to be a huge theme of today's discussion. Now, one thing I want to also mention before we continue is that if you have any questions, those of you who are watching, please feel free to not only share where you're watching from, but ask away. There's about a 15-second delay here, so just bear with us. I'm going to be watching the comments as you have any questions that you have. So let's get this started. So now, Tomer, tell me about your childhood in school having ADHD. Were you misunderstood? Were you bullied in school? Tell us a little bit more, because we have a lot of parents watching us that have kids with ADHD who are currently struggling in school and not really sure what to do.
Right. Well, I grew up in Israel. I lived there till I was 12 years old. And my whole initial exposure to schooling was in Hebrew. Learning Hebrew letters to this day was easier for me to handle in certain ways, the shapes and the format, the logic behind the language. At the age of 12, we moved to Johannesburg in South Africa, and I was at a disadvantage. I spoke English. My parents were both English speakers at home, but my reading and writing comprehension was very much behind. And I engaged high school. The first year of high school, I went there standard 5 with the condition that if I don't pass the exams, the 2 exams during the year, mid-year and final exams, I would have to repeat the year. You can
Isn't
imagine.
that crazy how school, you're just judged based off these exams. If you don't pass it, you're not going forward.
I tell you, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that tension just by talking about it again now, on how challenging that was. I had given up on my social life on the eve of my bar mitzvah, you know, just before you're 13 in Israel. And now I'm facing a different challenge of both forming a new social dynamic, but also succeeding in academics. Now, I was very lucky. I had a secret weapon called mom. And mom had, my mom was an English teacher.
All you moms, please show some love, show some likes, you know, let's go. This is really for the moms.
Absolutely. That's our secret weapon, the mother, for sure.
So continue. So you were just sharing how your mom was really your secret weapon, so to speak, in school.
Yeah, so she really, she felt personally responsible, and that's also her profession, to get us through that transition. And I remember the extra time, the homework, the attention that you had to give a family of 4 brothers. So we had 4 of us that you had to multitask and make sure that everyone gets through that. And I remember in Israel, it's very different. If you don't have exams the same way, you get certification, but you don't get challenged on a pass or fail as a prerequisite to moving up the next year, and at least in that early high school phase. But for me, the consequences were very real and very threatening. And that's something that I had to step up, not believing that I was at an advantage. Now, I started noticing while I was writing that I started connecting letters and becoming more script. It helped me be a bit more faster when I wrote things down, but letters were switching. I was, you know, and very much only when I reviewed the page retroactively, I noticed that.
Right.
And numbers and things like that. And they always attributed, maybe I'm used to Hebrew, and that's why it's happening. Hebrew, as you know, you write from right to left. And it really, that it was pretty much brushed under the carpet, as that's probably it. He's a new guy, and that's a story.
So would you say that was when you first realized that you were quote unquote different from your peers, or were you, at what point were you realizing that your ADHD was coming into play and impacting your time in school?
Well, I was slow. I was slower. I was slower than anyone. I don't like to be slow. I'm a firstborn.
Right.
And you know, I'm ahead of my.
I'm a firstborn also.
Yeah, we are firstborns. We don't like to be lost in anything. We pierce the world, and our siblings follow. In that sense, like we need to. I wasn't used to that at all.
Right.
You know, when we used to go bike riding outside, you know, you lead the way, and that's part of that leadership that really was challenged, coming from even a leader socially, to someone who's slower. Frustration starts amounting. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to write that. What the hell's going on? Like, it's not, you start to have this inner struggle with yourself. You start hating yourself. Like, well, what's going on? Who wrote that? I didn't write that. I meant to write something else.
Right.
So you're creating this a split almost in that kind of what you meant and what actually was
going on. You know, that I cannot relate to you more. It was when I was in school, I always remember this feeling of being misunderstood, and the behaviors that were shown in class when I would be reading during independent reading time, and I would be a behavioral problem, when in reality, I'm just an auditory learner, but no one knew that. So everyone just looked at my behavioral issue. So I was the troublemaker. And I wanted to so badly just explain it, but I didn't know how. And therefore I became insecure.
Right.
I lost my confidence. So you were now, how old were you at this time? Were you
12 was my first year, standard 5, and then it came out. The insecurity was already well established by, I remember, bar mitzvah, where suddenly I had to read in Hebrew, and I was back in my strong point. I read the whole Torah, like no problem. And everyone, oh, congratulations, you read the whole portion. I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. You know, I speak Hebrew. I understand what I'm reading. Right. So it wasn't an issue for me. And I empowered myself in that language. Later on, I had to really fight hard to maintain that language because, you know, when you don't hear a language spoken as much, it fades away. And we were speaking English at home. So I really had to keep up my Hebrew, and lucky I had a real passion to read about the IDF, the Israeli army. A lot of the best stories in the world are trapped in the Hebrew language. They really much are mind-boggling, and it's
pretty remarkable. And if anyone has a chance to really study the Hebrew language, there's so many layers to it. Now, when you're so, as you know, you've been very successful in the military, and you have such a remarkable story. There's so many corners to talk about here, but going to the military it takes, well, especially for what you were doing, it takes a lot of confidence. So what I want to know is, at what point, so you went from not confident in school to then going through the training and the rigor of it, and having to overcome not only adversity, but be able to persevere and have grit. So how did you do that? Is having ADHD, look, I mean, I had a lot of insecurities. I know a lot of kids that I work with have insecurities and struggle with confidence because of their performance in school. So how did you do it?
So it's very, that's really the empowering aspect of it. I remember getting distinction. The only things I got distinction in school was for Hebrew and for basketball. Those were the two things. And I was passionate about both of them. And I remember the last day in school, our teacher went around and she asked, you know, as you about to matriculate and attend the final exams and go into the big world, what do you plan on doing? You know, she was the head of the class, and she went one student one by one. I remember being always anxious to speak in front of people. I don't want my voice to be heard at all. It's one of the signs of the insecurity. I never raised my hand, never asked any questions in the class. I hated hearing my own voice in the classroom because of the inhibition. You adopt a state of being inhibited and non-confident. And she asked, what do you see yourself doing next year? And, you know, the very broad range of answers she got. And when she got to me, I said, I'm going to be a soldier in the IDF. And you have to understand, for someone who's in South Africa, who's very far away from the story of Israel and the Middle East in that sense, that was a very odd answer, but a very confident one. And I remember being so proud to saying that's what I'm going to do. It was very clear to me. She ended up
pushback. Did you get pushback?
Pushback.
Yeah, like the people say that you can't do that, or like you're crazy.
A lot of people saying, listen, it's all talk. I remember a close friend of mine in South Africa, his older brother, who was a tough guy, a gym goer, athlete. He played rugby, you know, in South Africa, you play rugby. First team rugby is like the equivalent of special forces in the military. And he went to the Israeli military and he quit halfway. He came back. And for me, that was like, whoa, you know, like if he quit, then, you know, then what are you talking about? But
you're going into something crazy.
I knew it was crazy to begin with. I read up a lot about it. And, you know, growing up in Israel, we always had close friends that were 2 years, you're in a small village in Gush Etzion, and your close friends are either 2 years older than you or 2 years younger than you. There aren't enough to fill out like the entire age group.
And for those of you, by the way, who don't know, in Israel, there is, when you hit 18, instead of going to college right away, you go to the army and you serve for the country. So what happens is when that 18th birthday, you going, and for the time frame ranges. So was that when you chose to go, or did you go later on?
Right. So the first thing I heard was that my two close friends who we grew up pretending to be superheroes and G.I. Joe, and we grew up with that in the 80s. So G.I. Joe was a huge part of it. And all we ever did was talk about the army and how we're going to do it. And my two close friends who are 2 years older than me actually did it. They were accepted into, the one got into Sayarat Matkal, which is the equivalent of Delta, and the other one in the recon unit. So they were the first who actually like, oh my God, they did it. It's those guys who say, one day I'm going to be in the NBA.
Right.
And
It's
actually,
like going to Harvard. It's like going to Harvard.
Yeah.
Right.
It's you have to understand it's very different to the US in terms of it's compulsory draft. So everyone goes into the army, and you have you can either join a regular regiment or you volunteer for the special forces. And the famous thing, the famous title is that if you don't want to be here, you can just quit and leave. They always give that to you. They always say, you don't have to be here. You can go, you'll do the regular service and get out. But the volunteering aspect of it means you try out. You need to go through a hell week initiation, and it's Israeli. It's not. I grew up in South Africa, very different mentality. There's a big difference going to gym.
Explain this mentality a little bit for our audience so that you can get a better understanding.
So the Israelis, they basically they're in a tough neighborhood, and it's a very from the word go, the country has had to fight for its survival. That's integrated into the society, and it's built into your understanding of it. Within the army, there's different units, different divisions, but the unit I got to try through is Golani, and Golani is considered very hard-headed. The analogy.
Now, what is that? Does that equate? What can that equate to? Like the U.S. military?
So I would say Marine. I hear a lot of the Marine Corps like shouting. The way they shout, the toughness is integrated already in the way you talk. So Golani is up in the north. It usually means you're going to be training in terrain that's very similar to Syria or Lebanon. And that's tough country, that is really terrorist havens and a very tough place. It's a volcanic plateau. So imagine the basalt rock, the hard stone, the extreme elevation, high peaks, the highest mountain in Israel is there, the snow, and alpine training, anything to do with alpine training fell under our broad spectrum of training as well.
So did you find though that when you were in school, right, your ADHD, right, the way you learned, did that propel you? Did that help you go, like what you experienced at a younger age? Did that help you have the strength to get through, for example, Hell Week, which I don't even want to know about, honestly?
Right. So I'll tell you you mentioned it before in other interviews. Frustration becomes your best friend. You're actually, I remember running, getting so frustrated that I couldn't finish an exam on time and I couldn't relay my knowledge, which I knew. I actually knew I was prepared for the exam. I ran out of time. I mismanaged my time. And in retrospect, it's part of the ability to attend an attention for 4 hours. It was a 4-hour exam. And I lost attention at some point. I mismanaged the time. And the frustration of not being able to deliver what I just came home slamming and kicking everything. And I went for a run listening to heavy metal. I was really into heavy metal at the time. Metallica.
I had my heavy metal phase also.
Nirvana.
Sometimes I still do.
Yeah, of course, because you know what? They actually voiced the way I was feeling. I always questioned what made me enjoy that kind of intensity, that music. But I was very much into it. I used to run with it as well. And I remember just running till I stopped feeling frustrated, and I basically continued running for a very long time because it doesn't leave you. So that frustration, I think, comes across when it comes to intensity and being challenged.
Right.
Unlike an academic environment, this is a physical environment. And the pain you feel in that, you know, I ran initiations later on, and it was what we were looking for is basically to break within the first 48 hours of Hell Week. You break anyone who thinks he's in shape or thinks he's got what it takes. The idea is to break them by taking off your watch, owning your time. You have no idea how long this is going to go for, and depriving you of sleep and food. You do that to any human being, and you've put them out of their comfort zone. This isn't running in the neighborhood. It's on the beach, and we own your time. We own your reality. So it changes everything around. It's not about the physical anymore. It's about the mental endurance.
Right. Now, can I just pause you right there? You said something very interesting that I want to highlight for our audience. You said that when you would get frustrated, you would go for a run, and you would just run until you weren't frustrated anymore. Now, that is so critical, and it's super important for those of you watching. I really encourage you that take some, this is very important. What you just performed, Tomer, that was an outlet. You had an outlet, a way for you to express, a way for you to let out your energy so that you can calm down and you could feel in control at a time when you may not have been in control. And I see this all the time. You know, I had this when I was the lowest point of my life in 6th grade, when I was being forced and bullied by my teachers to read out loud in class when I couldn't. And I had my model train set. You can see it, well, the bridge I'm building behind me, but I had that. And then I found running. And for you, you had running and you had other outlets. And for you watching, please, I encourage you, look at your kids' outlets, because let me tell you, when we get frustrated, or any of our outlets, right? When we get frustrated, what do we do to help ourselves calm down? So I think that was really cool what you shared, because that helped you realize that you like intensity. You not just like intensity, but you bring intensity to a whole new level. And I also like intensity. And I feel like a lot of kids that I work with, it's funny. I have a client who likes Sour Patch Kids, like sour candy, in racing games and video games. And I'm always like, what does that have in common? What does Sour Patch sour candy and racing video games have in common? It's stimulating. It's stimulation. It's intensity. So I just want to just recognize that. And for our parents watching, it's really important to explore that with your kids. Okay, now we can continue to Hell Week.
Right. So Hell Week it's also an expression, you know, once you've been through that intensity, you start identifying that your ability to focus after that intensity is much greater. You actually normalize yourself and you cool yourself down to the point where you can actually learn and you can study. We had to, in the military, you have to be very fluent with navigation. And navigation requires a lot of memorizing and a lot of terrain imagery. In those days, we barely had GPS. We were using GPS already in that context, in the military context. But you had to basically close your eyes and visualize the terrain you're about to walk through.
Wow.
And the idea was they put 60% of your body weight on you. It's a bag, it's a burden that you can't even lift. It took 2 people to put that backpack onto you.
Oh my God.
And you took like 3 steps back. They worked on long missions where you basically have to carry all your supplies with you, including water. And water weighs a ton. And when you camouflage for a week or more at a time, you need to have all your resources with you. And you have to carry them with you. And that kind of training is not just speed and intensity, but also just carrying carrying brunt weight, just being able
Right.
to carry heavy weights. You start at 8 o'clock in the evening on this navigation route. You have to get to certain points along the way and pick up these checkpoints, and you got to document them as well. You got to say, what did you see at this checkpoint,
Right.
in order for your officers to confirm that you were there. That you got to memorize that at 2 a.m.
Right.
You
Was
don't
memorization challenging? What was one of your like coming with having an LD? Was reading challenging? Memorization? I know a lot of times memorization and recall is really challenging. So, what were some of your challenges, and did that impact your performance during training?
So I think that memorizing was my alternative to be able to work things out or read. I mean, reading was never really the big challenge. It was more a comprehension of what I read. I used to get tired from reading and then not necessarily comprehending what I read. So I found myself reading it over and over and over again until I got it. And my ways to get around that was often using acronyms, using songs, using associative memory to unpack and open in different place. I remember before my exams, I used to memorize like poems, run into the exam, write everything down on a blank piece of paper, and then open that up like Windows in order to be able to use that during the exam, not having to think about it, because it saved me certain steps.
Right. Not thinking. That's another huge piece.
Thinking is where I used to lose time and get caught up in thinking and imagination.
The more we think, the more you think, the more burnt out you get. It's
right.
Did you know that chess players burn 6,000 calories a tournament?
Incredible.
Just by sitting down and thinking.
Incredible. I didn't know that. I know Formula One drivers lose weight.
It is, but apparently, I've been doing a lot of research with that. I think it's super fascinating. It's very, it's when we think, especially when it comes to new habits, you use more brain activity than when you are doing something repetitive. It's like backing out of a garage in your car. Think of all the tasks. It's like you have to determine the pressure on the pedal. You have to look at the oncoming traffic and calculate the distance and speed of the car. Is it safe to back out? The walls. You do all of that without thinking.
Right.
You think about it, like when they first invented the car, it didn't make sense. The garage, you kidding me? That sounds crazy.
Right.
Yeah, so we actually had a question here that I wanted to share with you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Were accommodations ever made for you in your style of learning, or did you figure things out for yourself?
That's a very good question. I basically had to figure things out for myself. I found that we were thrown into the deep end and we had to swim. That was usually the feeling. I was diagnosed with extra time during school at exams, and there was an allowance for me to stay longer during the exams when everyone else was told to put their pens down. Eventually, I had to go and pursue that. It was part of the shaming process. In other words, I took it very badly, almost that, it's not fair that they had to put their pens down and I can still go on for the next 15 minutes or so. So it added to that kind of shaming, that image that you don't want to encourage. In the military, I find that a lot of candidates were very similar to me. They were not the best students, to say the least. As you say, disruption is also a byproduct of not being able to focus. So you move on to being disruptive because you can't. Sitting still is death. Sitting still, you'd rather die, and you just became that. I must say that you learn what I learned, I think, in high school, to stay in a chair for an hour and a half at a time for double lessons and for the whole day, allowed me to maintain that cool, calm, and calculated approach, which later on allowed me to become a sharpshooter and then a sniper. The snipers are required by definition to be very calm and very quiet for an extended period of time. Now, someone with attention,
Hyper focus.
almost, yeah, it's hyper focus, and it's
Right.
almost a contradiction in terms. You know, the ADD guys should have machine guns and shooting and making noise and being loud. But I found that my real my natural environment was the calm, one shot, one kill, that kind of environment that I basically taught myself to thrive in. We always had to be prepared to go from that kind of secret and very camouflaged, silent, into the loudest, most aggressive mode you could ever come by in a blink of an eye, in a split second. So you
Wow.
need both those talents and both those sides of your personality, which were allowed to be expressed.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think there's something to say, not only to say about that, but you said something to me very, I just find very important that I want to bring back up in our conversation here about this concept of when the music isn't playing. You shared this with me a bunch of years ago, and I've never forgotten it, because everything sounds great when the music is playing. You know, that perfect scenario, or when we look at the success stories of some of these big entrepreneurs and musicians and leaders that have an LD that made it, and the music is playing. The real thing is when the music's not playing, and when no one's looking, and the challenge and the grit that's needed in order to move forward when you're down in it. And that's why I think, you know, this work that I'm doing, and by you sharing and giving this context, is so helpful, because it allows us to remember that when the music isn't playing, that's really the true test. And I want to relate that to school, because that's when the music isn't playing. And, you know, it's like the analogy is like when you're watching an action movie on mute.
Right.
Or imagine imagine watching Rocky, you know, the final fight on mute. It's completely, you just can't, it's just not the same.
Right.
But meanwhile, you're watching Rocky just get absolutely beat up. So if you don't mind just sharing that a little bit, just a little bit more, that would be really great.
Right. Well, absolutely. I think it's really comes down to your relationship with yourself. At the end of the day, if you're your own best friend during the dark times, there's a quote that says, you know, fair weather friends. It's the friends that are there when the sun is shining and they're around. But when it's dark and the military takes you to the darkest and coldest places in the world, figuratively and literally, the only thing that warms you up is your relationship with yourself and whether you believe in yourself or not. Now, remember, in Hell Week, you come on day one and you see tough guys there that are 5 times your size, and they're cut. They were born for this, and they quit after the first day. And you decide that you're going to be in that photograph. And I like photographs better than movies because photographs are silent. And
that's great.
My image wasn't a movie scene, but rather a still, a photograph of standing with the graduates at the end of that week. I wanted to be in that photo. And there wasn't a voice on earth, not even my own, who could stop me from being that guy in that photo. And you hit extreme moments. I was on an IV. I had fainted several times during the Hell Week. They told me, the doctor said, if this happens to you one more time, you're out. You're on that bus. You ring the bell and you're out. So make sure it doesn't happen to you. There's no empathy, by the way. Empathy is.
So what happened? What happened in that? So like did you like what was their mindset? Like, were you just like, I'm not gonna ever let that happen again, or did you have doubt?
It's basically you got to start conserving a bit of energy, because I was giving out too much. I was so hyperactive. I was burning my energy too quickly. And you know the difference between quick, short sprints and a long marathon run. It's a different strategy completely.
Yeah.
And that kind of like enthusiasm is very immature, but it's very expected. And they want to see that. They don't want to see people who maybe want to be in this unit. They want to see people who will die, and this is what they breathe and eat and sleep on every day. They want to be in that unit. They will let nothing stop them. You want passion, you want determination, and you want to know that this guy who's trying out, he really wants it. He wants it bad. He wants it so bad that he's prepared to go down the road for it. And you don't realize you're going to be fainting until it's too late. You basically wake up, but you're under the stretcher. You're running on the hot beach sand, under carrying logs. It's not. There's no music while that's happening in the background. Right. That log is very uncomfortable. It's sore. It's slapping against your head. You have a bruise on the side of your head.
Yeah. Right.
You know, it's just not. It's very aggressive and very cruel. And the only thing that keeps you going is that you associate. Remember those cruel times. Remember those frustrating times. Well, this is going to pass as well. So let's just grind it for now. I mean, you run. You know what it's like when you're hyperventilating. You're out of options. You're out of options. There are no options.
Absolutely. But you know what I hear? I also hear school. I hear school. I mean, on a totally like your face isn't up against a log in the mud with bruises, but mentally, it's very similar for someone who's struggling in school, being misunderstood and insecure about themselves socially, academically, personally, and having to get through that quote unquote hell week. In this case, it's more like hell years. So having that image, because I remember I had my image, I had my face doing this at graduation in college.
Right.
All I wanted to do was just say I did it.
Right.
And there's a picture of me saying I did it when I got during college, my college graduation. And that was the image that I had in my head for years. That's what got me through school. And I think it's nothing like Hell Week when you're training for the military, especially the special forces. However, the mindset I find fascinating because our kids were thrown in this without even knowing. Right. And they're thrown in this quote unquote hell week in school. So our mission as parents, as educators, as leaders, role models, is to help our kids have that strength and confidence to really get through that. And you learn a lot about yourself when you're in it. That's why I think, even though it's foggy now, and for you parents watching this, for your kids who are struggling, it's foggy now, it gets better. And it can get better.
I think I think just to stress that it's very important also to see how you take the small victories, how you celebrate small victories along the way, to encourage you out of these dark places. You say, I'll make it up to that tree. And when you get to the tree, you say, I'll make it to this rock. Yes. And you celebrate that. You celebrate, you see, you didn't think you were going to make it, and you got it. You're at the rock. Yeah. And the same thing with exams, the same thing with.
So true.
Otherwise, it's too long. When people break, when they have it's too much for them. They think, oh my God, if this is the first 24 hours, then there's no way in hell I'm going to do the whole week or the whole year and 8 months of the specialization. You have to break down your moment and celebrate small victories as you go along in order to pull yourself through. Yes. And really the frustration in school, it's very important to think back. How do you celebrate? Remember, you were getting an E and then you got a D. Now for people who like to win, they're both bad. You're not celebrating a D either. Yeah, you were getting lower marks, but now you got a D. You moved up a notch, but you're not winning. And we like to be winners.
Right.
And then that whole package goes out the window because you're not celebrating at any point. It's not good enough, not for them, for you. For you, you become
Right.
your own worst critic.
Right. Right.
So that's important. It's important that moving that one symbol up is as important as anything else in that battle or in that
Yes.
school, in that struggle, whatever it is.
Yes. Creating small wins builds enough momentum to get big wins.
Exactly.
And you know where it starts? I watched an awesome video about the power of making your bed. And in the military, as you know, making your bed, if that bed's not perfect,
right,
I don't even want to know.
Oh, you'll be running. You'll be running.
I don't want to know.
You'll be
So why should kids make their bed in the morning? And parents, I suggest you use this as good leverage for bed making.
Well, I first of all, I think it's because they can. In other words, it's the first task of the day. And the concept is a domino effect, that you stay a winner. You stay a winner. You stay in the winning mindset. If you got up and you're tired and you're lethargic and you're fatigued, but you made your bed, you gave yourself the message, the day, I'm not going back to that bed. You know, in the military, you sleep, the most shocking thing, there are 4 beds for 30 people. Now, how does that work? It's because there are only 4 people that are sleeping. Everyone else is doing something else. And it's not your bed. The first thing you got to get rid of is that's not your bed. There's no such thing as your bed anymore. That's a resting platform. And you go in with your muddy boots in the sleeping bag. It's still warm from someone else sleeping there, but
right.
when your head touches that pillow, you're out. Now you get up and you make that bed. You gave a very clear understanding to yourself, and that is the day's on, and I just performed my first task. I got that bed done, and then it creates a domino effect, and you get everything else done in a great way, and you win every time. You win every time. You stay with that winning. You stay with that winning, and more important, it's not just winning. It's the confidence and the belief that you're capable of doing this task. You may not do it right the first time.
That is gold.
Right the second time.
Yes.
You're not incapable. That incapable is what drives a person to either give up or to really reject the whole exercise and become disruptive and say this whole thing can go to hell.
It's so good.
That's really it.
I think there's making your bed. I always tell our mentees this, and for those of you who don't know, I run a mentorship program by Superpower Consulting. It's to help build confidence for kids with learning and attention challenges and young adults. And the one thing that one of the big things that we look at is, what do you do the first hour when you wake up? And that hour can set the stage for the rest of your day. Because if you don't make your bed, or let's say you do make your bed, you could have the worst day ever, but you can come back to a made bed and it's okay. You're good.
I want to just take it also to the place, I'm a father now of 4 girls. And I grew up with 4 brothers. So my whole reality is very different, but the education is the same. And whenever we get frustrated, I notice frustration with my girls as a parent. I say, what do you want to do? Let's come up with something that you're excited for, and identify that excitement. It doesn't matter what the task is, but if they're bored and they're not being productive, I said, let's think what excites you. And they can come up with, I want to take a spade and a shovel and go play in the sand. And then we say, okay, well, that's exactly what we're going to do. That just became the most important task of the day, is to take that spade and shovel. And we stop whatever we do and we switch off the iPads, the multiple inputs that just confuse and just overload you with cool stuff. It's the coolest stuff in the world. But now we're doing something. We're being proactive as opposed to a passive viewer. And I studied physical psychotherapy for 3 years after the military to show you that I really wanted to go professional with this understanding that physical workout can give yourself psychotherapy. It can calm you down. It can give you focus that you was otherwise unachievable without any external influences. Just sheer endorphins and adrenaline, and that's it. And you get back that focus. And I'm using that also to encourage creativity and taking on tasks seriously, no matter what the task is. Later on, you review it and you say, remember, we did it, or we beat the rain to the park. It didn't rain in the park and we got back. You create these happy moments. You stay within the control over your life and over your tasks and once again, your capacity and capability to do it.
Oh, that's so amazing. I think it gets so easy to focus on the challenging tasks, the challenges. But what if all of the keys are locked in our strengths? What if they're just there in our strengths and our job is to find them? And I definitely a big advocate for exercise as a way to not only boost creativity, but your focus, memory retention, recall. Oh my goodness, there's so much. So, my question for you is, what is your superpower, Tomer? If you were to have a superpower?
I would, I gave this a bit of thought, and I would say brute, uncompromising consistency.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. It's not the skill. I think I used to believe you're born with it. And my commander was the first to bust that myth. He says, he always told us that you can really overshoot your own capacity and capability by thinking what you can and cannot do. But we are in no position to make that judgment in terms of what we can and can't do. And it's a self-discovery over and over again, what's in us. And I always say, especially to those who have that frustration bottled up, you guys are nuclear bombs waiting to go off into this world and change it for the better. You have that kind of energy, that intensity.
Explosiveness
is a nuke, man. It's a nuke about to change the world. And that kind of focus, you need just consistency. You need never to give up, because by giving up, you are deciding what you can and cannot do. And that is not necessarily true. It's not true. It's actually a judgment. It's a decision, and usually you're working against yourself. And there's a famous story that an elderly rabbi, he was about to leave the world, and he was a righteous man. He had thousands of people. He really changed their lives. You mentioned when you save lives, you feel like you've contributed, you've done something right. And life-saving is a tremendous way of getting that gratification. This righteous man, he really was there, and he said he was surrounded by his closest students, and they saw that he was trembling with fear. And they said to him, Rabbi, how come you're so scared? I mean, there's no righteous person on earth like you. And he said, you know what I'm scared of? I'm not scared that they would compare me to Moses or Jesus or one of these tremendous people who changed the world. I'm scared that they would say, why wasn't I my full potential? In other words, why didn't I meet the full potential that I was given on this earth? So we don't compare ourselves to other people. Our challenge, our deepest challenge, is to live out the full potential that we individually, just as unique as our fingerprint is on this earth, that unique individuality has to be expressed at its most intense way to get it out into the world, because that is our unique contribution, and no one can do it for us. No one can do it for us. What the school tries to tell us is that we're all the same, and we all need to perform the same, or we all need to achieve the same, or to do that. And it's identifying your true power, your unique power that needs the focus. What you're passionate about, stay with that passion. Don't leave that passion. Stay there and become the expert of that passion.
Yes, absolutely. And it's ironic because sometimes that very passion can be the thing that you were once told you would never be good at.
Absolutely.
You know? I was told that communication would always be hard for me. It's on my IEPs, and now I do it professionally.
There you go.
You know, I'm telling you, you just never know.
You showed them, my friend. You showed them.
I showed them, absolutely. And that's the cool thing. It's like you don't, all these labels that are written about our kids, doesn't define them. It does not define them. And we have to be able to embrace the challenge, but let's not have it define us.
Absolutely.
So, now, is there anything else I was just going to say, is there anything else? We're about to wrap up here. So anything else that you would like to share with our audience? And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away. Tomer is a great leader, role model, and he works with kids. He's influenced countless, hundreds, thousands all over the world. So please, if you have anything else you'd like to share.
So I read now that Picasso, the artist, hated numbers. And he said every time he looked at a 7, it looked to him as an upside down nose. And I thought that was so big. I was told numbers, I should stay away from numbers. Math was my lowest score. Later on, through navigation, I did a pilot's license, and I did a lot of different activities that required some kind of calculation, mathematics. It may not be calculus or these advanced forms of math, but it definitely empowers you to say you're definitely not what they made you feel or make you think. And that's really the message, is don't let any voice out there tell you who you are.
Okay, I'm in. Don't let any voice tell you what you're not. I love that. That is so good. Now, thank you so much. Really, thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice.
I had so much fun, and we're definitely going to have you back, because I think it's really important for our audience, our community, to know and understand and learn that there's so many ways ADHD can play a role in a positive way, but also how we had to overcome the challenges that are associated with having a learning and attention challenge. So I really appreciate your time, Tomer, and just giving us this new perspective. So cool.
Thank you so much.
Now you also wrote a book, or you're writing one, or it's about to be released. So how can people find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Reading and writing wasn't my strong point, and here I am writing a book. So that's my next challenge. It's almost complete. It's really to document the 20th anniversary of the disengagement from Lebanon, and a war that was very much forgotten in military history. I'm sharing my unique perspective, not just on the battlefield, but also what it took through Hell Week and to get into that unit and be there at that historical event. I'm going to post my Patreon link. I'll send it to you, and
please
update and a big release, a big excitement for this very unique, the untold stories and Black Ops stories that are only now you're allowed to share and talk about. So it's very special stuff.
So special. I can't wait to read it.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. Everyone, thank you again for joining us.
And thank you so much.
You got it. Till next time. I'll see you next week.
All right.